The morning it started, I was standing in a pressed uniform under soft yellow light, listening to a man at a podium say kind things about my career. It was one of those polished rooms inside a government building where every shoe sound carries. Waxed floor, cool air, coffee somewhere in the hallway. My hands were still at my sides, and I was already thinking about getting out of there early enough to make my daughter's recital. Then my phone began to vibrate in my pocket. Once, then again, then a third time in a row. That pattern was never casual. I kept my face still and waited until the applause started. A major general reached out to shake my hand. I did what was expected. I shook it back. I nodded once. Then I stepped away and moved toward the side door. By the time I got into the corridor, I already knew something had gone wrong. The caller was a woman I didn't know. Her voice was tight, the way people sound when they are trying not to lose control in front of a stranger. "Mr. Mercer, this is Elaine from Brook Hollow Academy. Your daughter has been injured. You need to come to St. Anne's Hospital right now." I remember stopping beside a marble column, not asking how bad, not asking who was with her. I asked one thing: "Is she conscious?" A short pause. "Yes," she said. "She's asking for you." I thanked her, ended the call, and walked the rest of the corridor without rushing. My pace looked normal. That part mattered to me. Control mattered to me. I got to the parking lot, opened the car door, and only then let myself breathe all the way out. My daughter, Emma, was 12 years old. She liked old piano music, thick mystery books, and dogs of every size. That evening she was supposed to play at a school program. I had promised her I would be there in the front row this time, not on a screen, not late, not apologizing afterward. Traffic lights looked too slow that afternoon. The city did too. I remember the glare off windshields and the dry taste in my mouth from stale coffee. I remember resting both hands on the steering wheel so firmly that my knuckles lost color. At the hospital, the lobby smelled like antiseptic and burnt toast from a vending area nearby. A television in the corner was turned down low. A child was crying somewhere behind a set of double doors. I gave him his name at the desk, and the nurse looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "Fourth floor," she said quietly. "Room 418. There were 2 officers outside the room when I got there. One was young and trying not to stare at my uniform. The other had the tired look of someone who had already been having a hard day before mine arrived and made it worse. "I'm her father," I said. The older one stepped aside. Inside, the room was dim except for the bed light. Emma was sitting up against the raised pillow, her face wrapped in clean white dressings from forehead to jaw. Her hands were above the blanket, fingers slightly curled, as if she was reaching for something she hadn't found yet. "Dad," her voice was small, not weak, just careful. I crossed the room and took her hand. It felt cold and dry. "I'm here," I said. She turned her face toward me, but not quite accurately. That was the first moment something in me went perfectly still. "I can't see," she said. "Everything's dark." I leaned closer and held her hand with both of mine. "I know," I said. "I'm here now." There was a doctor near the window, a woman in dark blue scrubs with a chart held against her chest. Beside her stood a detective in a wrinkled sport coat, a notebook half open in one hand. Neither of them interrupted us right away. I appreciated that. Emma's breathing started to shake. I put one hand lightly on her shoulder and waited until it steadied again. The doctor stepped forward first. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Dr. Lena Park." I nodded. She chose her words carefully, which told me enough before she finished the sentence. "There was a chemical exposure in the science lab at school. We've flushed both eyes and done what we can to limit the damage, but the burns were severe." I looked at her and asked, "What chemical?" "Sulfuric acid." The detective shifted his weight and introduced himself as Daniel Ruiz. He did not sit down. He kept his voice low. "There was another student involved," he said. "A 13-year-old boy named Tyler Voss." I repeated the name once so I would remember it properly. "Tyler Voss." Ruiz nodded. "Witnesses say he threw the liquid during class. We're still sorting out statements." Emma's fingers tightened around mine. "It wasn't an accident," she said. Neither of us spoke over her. She swallowed and kept going. "He told me I acted like I was better than him. He said I needed to be put in my place." The room stayed quiet after that. Machines hummed softly near the wall. Someone rolled a cart past the doorway. I could hear the little rubber wheels crossing the tile. Then Dr. Park gave me the rest of it. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Corneal damage. Retinal injury. Uncertain recovery. Maybe some limited light perception in one eye. Maybe not. Doctors are careful when they don't want to take hope away too fast. I listened to every word. Then I asked, "Who is Tyler Voss's father?" Detective Ruiz glanced at the doctor before answering. "Martin Voss," he said. "Head of school." Emma turned slightly toward my voice. "Dad," I squeezed her hand once. "I'm here," Ruiz went on. "We tried to speak with the boy already, but his father retained counsel immediately. He's saying it was a lab accident. Nothing intentional." Emma's face tightened under the bandages. "He laughed," she said. No one in the room moved for a moment. I looked at the detective. "Where are they now?" He closed the notebook. "At home, as far as I know." I nodded once. There are moments when anger is loud. This wasn't one of them. What I felt was quieter than that. Cleaner, like a drawer closing. I bent toward Emma and adjusted the blanket near her wrist because it gave my hands something useful to do. "I'm going to take care of a few things," I told her. Then I waited. I left the hospital a little after sunset and drove back toward Brook Hollow Academy. The roads were still busy, but the afternoon rush had started to thin. Brake lights moved in long red lines through the intersections. A food truck near the corner of Pine and Mercer had its service window open, and I could smell grilled onions through the cracked window when I stopped at the light. Ordinary things were still happening all over town. People were picking up dinner. Someone was jogging with a dog. A bus hissed at the curb and opened its doors. My daughter had gone into a science classroom that morning with both eyes. By evening, a man with a school title and a lawyer was already trying to shape the story. The academy sat in the newer part of the city, back behind a stone sign, trimmed hedges, and a curved drive lined with small white lights. I had been there dozens of times over the years. Parent meetings, winter recitals, pickups after chess club. Places change when you have to look at them after they fail your child. The front office was still lit. A receptionist sat behind a desk with her shoulders pulled up too high, like she had already dealt with too many difficult conversations that day. "I need to speak with Martin Voss," I said. She gave me a quick professional smile that didn't settle anywhere. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Voss has had a full day and my daughter is in a hospital room upstairs in St. Anne's," I said. "I'm not here for next week." She looked down at her keyboard without touching it. "Let me see if he's available." I stepped back and waited near the window. The office had that school smell I've always noticed, but never had words for until then. Paper, dust, floor cleaner, dry heat from an overworked vent. Somewhere deeper in the building a copier started up and stopped. I stood with my hands loosely folded in front of me and watched the last daylight fade over the parking lot. A few minutes later, a side door opened and Martin Voss came out. He was a broad man in his 50s, still wearing a tie at that hour, jacket off, sleeves buttoned. He had the practiced expression of somebody used to being the calm center of the room. Not warm, just confident in the way institutions make certain men confident. "You're Emma Mercer's father," he said. "I am." He nodded as if we were meeting at a fundraiser. "I'm very sorry there was an incident today." I noticed the wording. Not what happened to my daughter. Not what your son did. An incident. "Your son threw acid into my daughter's face," I said. His expression barely shifted. "My understanding," he said, "is that there was a classroom accident involving shared materials during a lab exercise." I looked at him for a moment. "No," I said, "that is not your understanding. That is your position." The receptionist stopped typing. Voss's jaw tightened just enough for me to see it. "This is an emotional time, Mr. Mercer. I can appreciate that. But there are procedures in place, and we will cooperate fully with the proper review." "Did your son speak to police?" "My son is a minor." That wasn't the question. He looked past me toward the dark glass of the front window, then back at me. "Our attorney has advised us not to discuss an ongoing matter informally." I nodded once. Of course. That seemed to surprise him more than anger would have. I kept my voice even. "Then let's keep this simple. My daughter says your son did it intentionally. There were students in the room. There were adults in the building. There are lab logs, class rosters, hallway cameras, nurse records, parent messages, and a timeline. Facts do not need advice from counsel." He gave a short smile, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Again, I understand that you're upset." I let the silence sit between us. He mistook that for uncertainty. "Emma is clearly going through something traumatic," he continued. "Children can become confused after events like this. Memory fills in gaps. People around them say things. By tomorrow, the story can become very different from the event. The sentence landed exactly where he intended it to, on my daughter's credibility. I felt my right hand tighten once, then loosen again. "Be careful," I said. He folded his arms. "Excuse me." "Be careful what version of reality you build this early," I said. "You may have to live inside it for a long time." That was the first time he really looked at me. Not the uniform, not the posture. Me. I had spent most of my adult life around people who relied on noise, rank, money, position, access. People like that tend to believe pressure is the same thing as authority. It isn't. Authority is what remains when the room goes quiet. He glanced toward the receptionist again. "If you're threatening me, I'll ask you to leave. I'm giving you a chance to act like a principal instead of a father protecting a guilty son." His face hardened then. The school administrator was gone. The parent remained. "My son is not guilty of anything," he said. "And I will not let this school be dragged through the mud because an injured child tells a dramatic story." The word dramatic stayed with me. I looked at the nameplate on his office door, the framed mission statement on the wall, the brochure holder by the entrance with glossy photos of smiling children in uniforms. Systems, messages, branding, order. That was his territory. Paper and language, delay and confidence. "Then I'll work with paper too," I said. He frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done talking for today." I turned and walked out. No threats, no raised voice, no scene for the benefit of strangers. Just the cold air outside, the gravel under my shoes, and the parking lot lights coming on one by one. I sat in the car for a full minute before starting it. Then I took my phone out, opened a blank note, and typed the first line. 6:42 p.m., Martin Voss described chemical attack as a classroom accident. Then another. Implied Emma's statement may be unreliable due to trauma. Then another. Would not confirm Tyler spoke with police. Referred to attorney. I put the phone face down. Then I drove back to the hospital. Emma was awake when I got there. A nurse was adjusting the drip line. The room was dimmer now, and someone had brought in a small speaker playing quiet instrumental music at low volume. It sounded like piano, slow and careful. I wondered if the nurse had done that on purpose. Emma turned her head when I came in. "You went somewhere," she said. "I did. To school." "Yes." She was quiet for a second. "Did you see him?" "I saw the head of school." She took that in. "Was Tyler there?" "No." The nurse finished what she was doing and gave us the room. Emma moved one hand over the blanket, like she was looking for the edge of it. I guided her fingers to it, and she held there. "Dad," she said, "they're going to say I made it up." It was not a question. I pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. Some people say whatever helps them get through the first 48 hours. That doesn't make it true. "I heard the detective outside earlier," she said. "He was talking to somebody on the phone. He said the family already hired attorneys." "That sounds right." She turned a little more toward me. "Does that mean they win?" "No." I answered that immediately because hesitation matters to children. Then I added, "It means they know this is serious." She nodded a little, but the fear in her face didn't leave. She had always been observant, even as a little girl. If a grown-up entered the room carrying worry, she felt it before they sat down. "Am I going to be blind forever?" she asked. The machines kept their soft, steady rhythm. There are questions a parent wants to refuse on principle. This was one of them. But she deserved honesty more than comfort that might not hold. "The doctors don't know everything yet," I said. "They know enough to be careful. So that's what we're going to be too." She breathed in slowly. "Okay, we'll take one step at a time." Another small nod. Then, after a pause, she said, "I don't want people deciding what happened to me without me." That line settled into me in a way very few things ever have. I reached into the inside pocket of my coat and pulled out a pen and a folded visitor sticker backing card. It was the only paper I had on me. "Tell me exactly what happened," I said. "From the beginning." Slowly. So she did. She told me about the lab table layout, which teacher was in the room, which students were nearest, which shelf held the safety goggles. She told me Tyler had been restless from the beginning of class, that he had made 2 comments under his breath before the teacher heard one and told him to stop, that he moved his beaker with his left hand, that he looked directly at her before he threw it. I wrote everything down in small block letters. When she hesitated, I didn't fill the silence. I let her find the next piece on her own. By the time she finished, both sides of the card were full. I read it back to her. She corrected me twice. One time on the order of the sentences Tyler used. Another time on whether a stool had fallen before or after the teacher shouted. Precision mattered to her. That told me her mind was working cleanly. When I finished reading it back, she let out a long breath. That sounds right, she said. I folded the card carefully and put it back in my pocket. Then I asked her one more question. Did anyone say anything to you after it happened? Before the ambulance? Yes, she said after a moment. Miss Grady from the office. She kept saying help was coming. And Tyler said, my dad will fix this. I wrote that down too. A little later, after she fell asleep, Detective Ruiz came by again. He stood near the doorway with a paper cup of coffee gone cold in his hand. How's she doing? He asked. The same. He nodded once. He looked tired enough that his shoulders had started to slope. I wanted to update you, he said. We're collecting statements, but the family is already pushing back hard. Their attorney contacted the department. They're saying there's no basis for criminal intent. I watched him over the side rail of the bed. What do you think? He rubbed at one eye with the back of his knuckle. I think I've seen accidents. This doesn't sound like one. That was the first thing anybody in official clothes had said all day that felt clean. What do you need? I asked. Time, he said. And documents. Records. Clean statements before stories start changing. I nodded. He looked at Emma, sleeping under the thin hospital blanket, then back at me. I'll be honest with you. The other side has influence. School board, donors, local committees, the usual web. I'm familiar with webs. That got the faintest reaction out of him. Not quite a smile. I figured, he said. Then he set the coffee cup on the windowsill and lowered his voice a little more. There's one thing bothering me already. The hallway camera outside the lab should have caught at least part of the aftermath. Students running out. Faculty response. Something. But school IT says there was a sync failure around that time. A sync failure. Yeah. I looked at the dark window beside him. My reflection was faint in the glass. Get that in writing, I said. His eyes came back to me. He nodded slowly. That was already on my list. After he left, I sat by the bed and took out my phone again. That was the point where the shape of the problem changed for me. Not because I was more emotional. Because I was less. A child had been injured. A father with status was already managing language. A camera had failed at the right time. An attorney had appeared before sunset. Those were not feelings. Those were parts. And when something has parts, it can be worked. I opened a new note and started a second list. What exists? Hospital intake time EMS report. Nurse triage note, classroom roster, seating chart, lab inventory, parent notification, records, security logs, school IT, records, witness statements, then another. What can change? Student memory, faculty, wording, internal emails, camera explanation, disciplinary framing, then a third. What must be locked? First, Emma's account, timeline, names, exact phrases, official requests. I looked up at the bed again. Emma was asleep, one hand still curled near the blanket edge, as if she was holding on to the room by touch alone. Outside in the hallway, somebody laughed softly at something a nurse said. A machine beeped in another room and was silenced. The hospital went on being a hospital. I put the phone face down. Then I waited. I stayed at the hospital until a little after 4 in the morning. There is a certain hour when buildings become honest. The noise falls away. People stop performing competence and just do the work in front of them. Shoes move slower in the hallway. Voices drop. Ice clinks in paper cups. Machines seem louder because everything else has quieted down. Emma slept for a while, woke once, asked if I was still there, and went back to sleep after I answered. I never left the chair. At 5:10, I went down to the lobby cafe, bought the worst coffee in the city, and sat at a small round table by the window with my notebook open. I had learned a long time ago that a crisis gets worse when you treat it like one large thing. Better to divide it. Better to reduce movement. Better to work in order. So I made 3 columns. People. Records. Pressure points. Under people, I wrote Emma. Detective Ruiz. Dr. Park. Lab teacher. School nurse. Front office staff. Students near the table. School IT. Martin Voss. Tyler Voss. Under records, I wrote hospital intake, EMS, incident report, parent notifications, camera logs, visitor logs, lab materials inventory, internal emails, maintenance tickets, disciplinary history, donor board minutes. Under pressure points, I wrote timing, language, camera failure, attorney speed, school reputation, witness fear. Then I drank half the coffee and left the rest. By 6:30, I was in my car with the heater running low, looking at the first pale light over the parking structure. The city looked washed out and ordinary. Newspapers in racks. Delivery trucks at curbs. A man in a gray coat walking too fast with a briefcase and no hat. I made 2 calls before 7. The first was to a former logistics officer I had known for years. His name was Nate Hollis. Calm voice. Good memory. He ran compliance reviews for a private education firm now, which meant he understood how schools documented problems and how they hid them when they tried. He answered on the second ring. Daniel. Morning. He was quiet a moment. You only call this early when something matters. My daughter was attacked at school yesterday. There was no interruption, no empty sympathy. One of the reasons I trusted him. What do you need? He asked. I need to know how fast an academy can move internal records if they decide to protect themselves. Fast, he said, especially if the head of school controls the messaging. I figured. He exhaled softly. What kind of school? Private. Midsize. Well-funded. College prep branding. That means layers, he said. Board committees. Development office. Legal counsel. They'll separate everything on paper and try to make each piece look routine. I want the routine. He understood that too. Start with written requests, he said. Not calls. Email creates a clock. Ask for preservation of all incident-related records, including footage, logs, internal communications, access records, disciplinary materials, nurse notes, and chain of custody on hazardous materials. I already have the categories. Good. Send it to the head of school, board chair, legal contact if you can find one, and copy yourself somewhere permanent. Don't sound emotional. Sound organized. That won't be difficult. I didn't think it would, he said. Then he added, and Daniel, if camera footage failed at the exact right time, ask for service tickets and outage history, not just the footage. People are lazy when they lie. They forget the support records. I wrote that down. The second call was to a woman named Karen Bell. She had spent 20 years in educational insurance defense before leaving it and doing independent risk consulting. I knew her through a mutual friend. We had spoken maybe 4 times in 10 years. She picked up sounding half awake and fully alert. I gave her the short version. She did not waste time with outrage. Has the school contacted you directly in writing yet? She asked. No, they will. When they do, they'll use soft language. Concern, support, community. They'll never use the words they fear. I know. Good. Do not answer by phone if you can avoid it. Written only. Friendly, brief, clear. Make them commit to nouns. That was useful. She continued. And ask whether the science room was inspected before class, whether the students were issued eye protection, who signed the chemical handling log, and whether the parent handbook describes incident response. Schools love handbooks until a handbook becomes evidence. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat for another minute and looked at the steering wheel. Hidden competence is not mystery. It is usually just memory plus order. By 7:15, I had opened my laptop in the hospital family lounge and started drafting the first preservation notice. I kept the language plain. Not hostile, not theatrical, just specific. I addressed it to Martin Voss, copied the board chair whose name I found on the academy website, and copied a general administrative address, the admissions office, and myself at 2 separate email accounts. The subject line read, request to preserve all records related to March 14th science lab incident involving Emma Mercer in the body. I listed categories. All video and access control records for the science wing, hallways, office corridors, parking areas, and exterior entrances for the full school day. All internal emails, texts on school-managed devices, incident reports, disciplinary notes, nurse records, maintenance logs, IT service tickets, and communications relating to the event. All records concerning chemical storage, issue logs, classroom inventory, safety equipment distribution, lab supervision, and post-incident cleanup. All prior disciplinary records involving Tyler Voss that could reasonably relate to violence, threats, chemical misuse, harassment, or classroom misconduct. I read it once for tone, then once for accuracy. Then I sent it. No flourish, no warning, just the sound of the key under my fingertip and the small whoosh the mail client made when it left. Then I waited. At 8:03, Martin Voss replied. That speed told me plenty. His message was short and polished. He said the academy was praying for Emma's recovery, that they took student safety seriously, and that they were conducting an internal review in coordination with the proper authorities. He added that some requested materials might be protected by student privacy policies and that outside counsel would respond regarding next steps. He did not deny the request. He did not confirm preservation. He did not mention his son. I saved the email as a PDF. Then I printed it in the hospital business alcove and slid the warm paper into a folder I'd picked up from the volunteer desk. That was the first document in the file. By 9, Detective Ruiz called. "I got your voicemail," he said. "I didn't leave one." A pause. Then he understood. "Right? Your email." "Yes." He let out a short breath that almost sounded like approval. "You move quickly. I prefer clocks to conversations." That makes two of us. I managed to get a copy of the school's preliminary incident summary, and it uses the phrase unintentional chemical contact. I looked down at the folder in my lap. "Of course it does." He went on. "Also says there was no prior indication of conflict between the students." "That may be false." "You have something?" "Not yet," I said, "but I expect to." He was quiet for a moment. "The camera issue is already getting slippery. School IT claims a synchronization fault hit 2 hallway units and 1 exterior feed between 1:08 and 1:21 p.m. Specific. Too specific," he said. "That's what bothered me." I let that settle. Then I asked, "Who told you?" "The IT manager. In person." "Did he produce logs?" "Not yet." "Then all you have is a sentence." He did not answer right away. Then he said, "That is exactly why I called. There are moments when two people decide, without saying it plainly, that they are going to deal in reality and not in polite fiction. This was one of those moments." "What else?" I asked. "The teacher's account is firm. Says she turned to address one student at the sink and heard Emma scream. She did not see the throw itself. Convenient. Maybe. But one student near the back says Tyler had been muttering at Emma most of the period. Another now says she isn't sure. Parents. Already involved." I nodded even though he couldn't see it. "Expected." Then Ruiz said something I had been waiting to hear. "The Academy's general counsel requested that any police contact with Tyler go through their office." "General counsel," I repeated. "Yeah, that's fast for a school." That's what I thought. After the call, I added another sheet to the folder and wrote a timeline by hand. 1:08 to 1:21 p.m. claimed camera sync failure. Post-incident, same day, attorney retained. Evening, school language shifts to accident framing. Next morning, records preservation request triggers immediate managed response. Facts create shape. Shape creates direction. Around 10:30, I went upstairs to Emma's room. She was awake and sitting carefully against the pillows. The morning light came through the blinds in thin, warm strips. There was oatmeal on the tray table, untouched except for one spoon mark. A children's audiobook was paused on a tablet beside her. She heard my steps and smiled faintly in my direction. "You have paper," she said. I looked at the folder in my hand. "I do. You always carry paper when you're solving something." That was true enough that I nearly smiled. I set the folder down and sat beside her. "How are you feeling?" "My face hurts less," she said. "Everything else hurts more." I knew what she meant. I adjusted the blanket near her elbow. "I need to ask you a few more things." "Okay. Not because I don't believe you." "I know," she said. "Because details matter." "That too." So I asked about the week before the attack. About seats in class. Group assignments. Comments in hallways. Anything Tyler had said that stood out before yesterday. This time she remembered 3 things. The first was a remark at lunch 5 days earlier. Tyler had told another boy that Emma always acted like the teachers worked for her. The second was from the previous afternoon in science. He had asked to switch stations and seemed irritated when the teacher said no. The third mattered most. 2 weeks earlier, Emma had reported Tyler for knocking a smaller student's project off a lab table and blaming someone else. The teacher had made them both stay after class. "Did he know you reported it?" I asked. "Yes." "How?" "He told me the next day I should mind my own business." I wrote that down. Then I asked one more question. "Did the school ever contact you before yesterday about problems involving him?" "No." "Any messages from his father? Staff? Anyone?" "No." I thanked her, and she reached for my hand. I gave it to her. "Dad," she said quietly, "are you angry?" "No." That answer was true in the exact form I meant it. She held my hand a little tighter. "You get quieter when something is serious." "I know. That means you already know what to do." I looked at the folder again. "I know what to do next," I said. That was closer to the truth. At noon, the school sent its first formal letter. Not by email alone. A courier delivered a sealed envelope to the hospital front desk with my name written correctly in block print. That detail interested me. Couriers are chosen when people want wait without conversation. Inside was a letter from outside counsel for Brook Hollow Academy. Sympathy in the first paragraph. Privacy in the second. Warning in the third. It said the school expected all parties to refrain from making defamatory statements while the facts were under review. It advised that preservation obligations would be handled appropriately. It reminded me that juvenile matters were sensitive and that speculative allegations could harm innocent families. I read it twice. Then I turned the page over and looked at the letterhead again. The law firm was local, reputable, expensive. One of the partners sat on 2 nonprofit boards and a city education foundation. That went into the folder too. Then I made another list. What they are doing: controlling language, narrowing access, slowing records, shielding the child through counsel's signaling influence without stating it. What that means: they are worried about facts, not rumors. They believe delay helps them. They expect me to react emotionally. They do not yet understand my pace. That afternoon, I stepped into the hallway and called a third person. His name was Eric Sloan, retired now. Before that, he had spent a long time in digital forensics and internal investigations. Quiet man. Exact. He owed me nothing, which is one reason I trusted him. When he answered, I asked a simple question. If a camera system has a synchronization failure in 3 locations for 13 minutes, what else should exist? He answered without hesitation. Server logs, alert emails, vendor pings, trouble tickets, reboot records, user access logs, maybe badge entry from whoever touched the system physically. And if none of that exists, then you don't have a failure, he said. You have a sentence. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I went back into Emma's room, pulled the visitor chair to the window, and began arranging the folder in order. Letter first, email second, timeline third, handwritten notes fourth, clean pages in the back for what came next. Outside, rain had started lightly against the glass, the kind that barely shows unless you are looking for it. The room smelled faintly of saline and warm plastic from the equipment. Emma drifted back to sleep while an afternoon nurse checked her chart in the doorway and moved on. At 3:17, a new email arrived from the academy. This one was from the board chair. One sentence in the middle stood out. At present, we have no information suggesting any broader student safety issue at Brook Hollow Academy. I read that line 3 times. Then I opened a fresh page and wrote, they are already protecting the institution, not just the boy. That mattered, because once an institution chooses itself, it leaves traces everywhere. I put the phone face down. Then I started looking for them. By late afternoon, I had enough to stop thinking in feelings and start thinking in sequence. That shift matters. People imagine a parent in my position would be overwhelmed, emotional, loud. Maybe some are. I wasn't. Not because I felt less. Because Emma needed the opposite of noise. I sat in the family lounge with the folder open, a legal pad beside it, and wrote 3 lines across the top of the page. Step 1, lock the record. Step 2, separate truth from language. Step 3, move the pressure away from the child and onto the system. Once those were in front of me, the rest got simpler. Step 1 meant preserving everything that could still be changed, softened, or misplaced. Step 2 meant turning phrases like incident and accident back into what they were trying to hide. Step 3 meant making sure this stopped being one hurt girl against one protected boy. Institutions know how to isolate a child. They are less comfortable defending their own procedures under light. I started with step 1. I drafted a second written notice. This one was narrower and more precise. I addressed it to the school's outside counsel, copied the board chair again, copied Detective Ruiz, and asked for confirmation that no responsive records had been deleted, overwritten, or altered since the time of the attack. Then I listed the items that mattered most right now. Camera system logs, badge access to the security office and IT room. All IT tickets opened within 24 hours before and after the claimed sync failure. The chain of custody for the lab materials used in that class period. The roster for that science section. The teacher's written account, including draft versions if the account had been revised. I used the phrase including prior versions on purpose. Drafts make people nervous. Then I sent that too. A few minutes later, I called the hospital and asked to speak with records. I requested Emma's intake summary, triage timing, and emergency treatment timeline. Routine request. Routine voice. I asked when the written release would be ready for pickup and thanked the clerk before she could explain the process twice. Then I called the EMS provider and requested dispatch and transport timing. Then the city fire department, because they handled hazardous exposure responses in school settings, and I wanted to know whether anyone had been consulted from the scene. No dramatics. No speeches. Just timestamps. By 5:30, the legal pad had become a working map. Known timeline class period began comments in room before attack, chemical thrown teacher response, nurse response, parent call, ambulance, hospital intake, attorney, retained school language shifts, camera explanation, appears. I drew a line through the center of the page and wrote on the other side. Where truth can be tested, timing mismatch, wording mismatch, access mismatch, who knew what, when. Then I waited. Waiting is part of this kind of work. It isn't passive. It's where you let the right people make small mistakes. At 6:11, Detective Ruiz texted and asked if I could step into the hallway for a call. I did. His voice was lower than usual. I got the teacher's revised statement. Revised? Yeah. I leaned against the wall beside a supply cabinet and looked at the floor tile while he talked. The first version noted intentional throwing motion reported by multiple students. The revised version says rapid arm movement consistent with mishandling of lab contents. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Who requested the revision? She says she clarified after speaking with school administration. Who in administration? She didn't say. Yet. That word mattered. Yet. Ruiz kept going. Also, one parent reached out to me off the record. Her son was in the room. She says he came home upset and said Tyler had been talking about Emma for days. But now the family doesn't want him involved. Because the school contacted them? Possibly. I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, don't ask them to be brave. Ask them to be accurate. He was quiet. Then, that's a good line. It's not a line. It's instructions. I heard paper moving on his end. One more thing. I finally got confirmation from the district hazmat consultant who answered the school's call after the incident. He wasn't contacted until after the ambulance left. That's late. That's what he said. I looked through the narrow glass panel in the hallway door. The evening nurse was in Emma's room, checking the 4. Send me the consultant's name, I said. I can't officially. No, but you can pause after certain words. He understood. A few seconds later, he gave me the first name, then the last, with just enough silence between them to qualify as carelessness. After the call, I wrote the name down. Then I added another note. If the exposure response was delayed, the school may have prioritized narrative control over emergency procedure. That was not an accusation yet. It was a line of inquiry. There's a difference, and I am careful with the difference. By 7, the Academy's outside counsel replied to my second notice. The message was polished and irritated in equal measure. They said my requests were overbroad, that they would preserve all materials required by law, and that some internal documents were privileged or outside the scope of any reasonable request. Again, no confirmation of specifics. Again, no denial. That told me the same thing as before. They were managing the edges. So I moved to step 2. I opened a clean document and began building what I call a language table. 2 columns. On the left, their words. On the right, the plain meaning. Incident. A child was permanently injured. Accident. Disputed by witness accounts and victim statement. Sync failure. Unproven until logs exist. Clarified statement. Statement changed after administrative contact. Sensitive juvenile matter. Shield around a favored family. No broader safety issue. Institutions speaking before facts are complete. When a system starts lying, it usually lies first through vocabulary. Once I had the table, the rest of the writing became easier. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I drafted a third document. I did not send it yet. I wanted it ready. It was addressed to the Academy's board, not the administrators. Boards do not like surprises. They like risk assessments, exposure, process failure, donor confidence, and terms like foreseeability. They like to believe they sit above messes. Often they are the mess. I kept the tone professional, almost gentle. I explained that the existing written record already showed concerning irregularities, immediate accident framing before witness review was complete, a claimed camera outage without supporting logs, a revised teacher statement after administrative contact, and indications that at least one witness family felt pressure to withdraw. Then I wrote the line that mattered most. I trust the board understands the difference between defending a child's rights and defending preventable institutional misconduct. I saved the draft but did not send it. Not yet. Pressure works best when it arrives in layers. The next morning began with rain. Not heavy, just a steady gray drizzle that made the parking lot shine like brushed steel. I went downstairs for coffee again, brought 2 cups back, and handed one to Detective Ruiz when I found him outside the room. He looked at the cup, then at me. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He took it anyway. For a few seconds we stood there in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Then he said, "You've done this before." I looked at the paper band around my own cup. "I've organized difficult things before." He nodded. He didn't ask the next question. I respected him for that. Instead, he said, "I spoke with one of the kids who was closest to the table. Alone this time, with a child interviewer present. No parent in the room. And," he said. Tyler looked at Emma first. That was the first clean witness phrase I had heard outside Emma's own account. "Exact words?" I asked. Ruiz checked his notebook. He looked right at her like he was making a decision. I let that sit. Then I said, "Get that preserved exactly as spoken." "Already did." He sipped the coffee and made a face like it was worse than he expected. It probably was. "One problem," he added. "The school's council is pushing for all student interviews to route through coordinated scheduling now." "Of course." He lowered his voice. "And Martin Voss keeps calling this a tragedy. That's because tragedy sounds ownerless." Ruiz looked at me for a second and almost smiled into the cup. By noon, I had Emma's hospital intake summary, the EMS timestamps, and enough sequence to see a gap. The parent call from the school came later than it should have. Not by an hour. Not by anything dramatic. By enough. Enough to suggest that conversations had happened before I was notified. Enough to make me ask who was called first. School nurse. Administrator. Counsel. Parent. In what order? Those questions went on to a fresh page. Then I made another call. This one to the academy's front desk. The receptionist answered with that same careful brightness. "This is Daniel Mercer," I said. "I'm trying to confirm the exact time the school called me yesterday. Let me see if I can help." I could hear keyboard clicks. Then a pause. Then more clicking than the question required. "We have a note that outreach was made promptly," she said. "That's not a time. I'd need to ask administration for anything more detailed." "I'm sure you would." I ended the call politely and wrote down the exchange word for word. Then I did the same with the emergency contact app notification, which had a timestamp. Later than ideal. Later than careful. Later than I expected from a school that claimed student safety was central to its mission. At 2:20, the hazmat consultant I had indirectly identified returned a message I had left through his office. He did not want to be in the middle of anything. That was clear. His tone was formal and clipped. I asked only procedural questions. In a sulfuric acid exposure at a school, when should consultation occur? Immediately. Should irrigation begin at once? Yes. Should the area be documented and isolated? Yes. Should chemical source handling be tracked? Absolutely. Then I asked, would a delayed call to outside support concern you? A pause. Then, any delay in a chemical exposure involving a minor would raise questions. That was enough. I thanked him and ended the call. I did not need him to join a fight. I only needed the rule. Back upstairs, Emma was awake and listening to rain touch the window. "That's not hospital noise," she said when I came in. "Rain." "I know." She smiled faintly. "I can tell." I sat beside her and straightened the folder on my lap. She tilted her face toward me. "You're carrying more paper." "Yes." "Is that good or bad?" "Usually good." She thought about that. "You sound more settled." "I am." "Why?" "Because once enough facts line up, people become predictable. Because systems reveal themselves under pressure. Because the truth had already started showing through the seams. But I gave her the version a 12-year-old deserved. Because I know the next steps." She reached for my hand and found it on the second try. "Then I'm okay." That stayed with me. Not because she believed everything would be easy. Because she trusted order more than reassurance. That evening, I finally sent the board letter. Not to threaten. Not to posture. To create one more clock. I sent it at 5:04 p.m., when offices are still open and people are tired enough to read carefully. Then I printed that too and slid it into the folder. By 6:15, the board chair replied. Short message. Very short. He said the board took my concerns seriously and had initiated an independent review of the Academy's handling of the event. Independent. That was the first real movement. Not justice. Not yet. But movement. I read the message once, saved it, and put the phone face down. Then I opened the folder again, removed one sheet from the middle, and started a new page titled, "What happens if they still choose protection over truth?" I had just written the date at the top when another message came in. This one was from an unknown number. No greeting. No name. Just one sentence. Check the chemistry prep room log from the week before. I read the message twice. Then I saved a screenshot, wrote down the time, and put the phone on the table without replying. Unknown messages can be bait. They can also be the first honest thing you get all week. Either way, you do not rush toward them. I looked at the folder, then at the rain on the window, then back at the phone. The chemistry prep room log. That was specific enough to matter. I made 2 notes. 1. Someone inside the school is uncomfortable. 2. They believe the prep room log shows planning, access, or prior misuse. Then I waited 10 minutes on purpose. After that, I called Detective Ruiz. He answered on the second ring. Ruiz. I received an anonymous text. His voice changed immediately. More alert. Less tired. What does it say? Check the chemistry prep room log from the week before. A short silence. Did you reply? No, good. I saved it. Also good. He exhaled once. That's not random. No, you think staff? Either staff or someone close enough to know where paper lives. He made a small sound that meant agreement. I can request it directly. Do it before they remember to lose it. I was already headed that direction. I ended the call and went into Emma's room. She was asleep again. The blinds had been tilted down, and the room had that gray-blue evening light that makes every metal rail and plastic surface look colder than it is. There was a clean folded blanket on the chair and a cup with 2 untouched pencils on the windowsill, probably left by a volunteer. I stood there for a moment with my hands in my coat pockets. Then I stepped back into the hallway and called the school. Not the head of school, not council, the science department office. A man answered, gave his name too quickly, and sounded like someone who wished the phone would stop being a phone. "This is Daniel Mercer," I said. "My daughter is Emma Mercer." A pause. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to confirm one detail for the timeline. Does the chemistry prep room maintain a manual access log or a digital checkout record?" Longer pause. "We have standard lab procedures." That wasn't the question. Paper moved somewhere near his receiver. Then he said, "There is a sign-out sheet for certain controlled materials." "Thank you." Before he could redirect, I added, "Who keeps it?" "The department chair." "And where is it stored?" Another small pause. "In the prep room." "Thank you." I ended the call. That answer alone didn't prove anything. But the hesitation did what hesitation always does. It told me there was a real object in a real place, and it had suddenly become important to someone besides me. At 7:42, Ruiz called back. "I'm standing in the science office," he said quietly. I could hear voices in the background and one drawer opening and closing. "And there is a prep room log." "Good. It has already been removed from the usual binder." I closed my eyes once. "But," he said, "the department chair says she made photocopies for weekly inventory reconciliation and forgot she had them in her desk." That was the first real break. "Anything in it?" I asked. "Oh yeah." His voice stayed low and flat, which told me the contents were serious. 2 entries last week showing Tyler Voss in the prep room during lunch under the reason teacher helper. No teacher initials beside either entry. And 1 note from the day before the attack. Student present near acid cabinet. Reminded not to handle items unsupervised. No name written. Just initials. TV. I looked at the rain-dark window at the end of the hallway. Photocopy everything. Already done. Get the original too. I am. I heard another voice on his end, more formal, probably someone from administration. Then Ruiz lowered his voice even more. "Martin Voss just arrived." That was sooner than he should have arrived unless someone had informed him. "Interesting," I said. "Yeah." I thought for 1 second. Then I said, "Tell him I'll be there in 30 minutes. Ruiz went quiet. "You sure?" "Yes." "Mr. Mercer, this is still an active investigation." I understand the words. That's not what I meant. I appreciated that. "I'm not coming to argue," I said. "I'm coming to listen." He didn't answer for a moment. Then he said, 30 minutes. When I hung up, I went into Emma's room and found Dr. Park adjusting the chart at the foot of the bed. I need to step out for a little while, I told her. She looked at me over the chart. She had the kind of face that gave away almost nothing, which I respected. Will you be reachable? She asked. Yes. She glanced at Emma, then back at me. She'll ask where you went if she wakes up. Tell her I'm handling paperwork. Dr. Park gave the smallest nod. That sounds like something she'd believe. It's also true. I left the hospital just after 8. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still slick. Streetlights were reflected in long, broken lines on the pavement. My shoes made that faint tack sound against the parking deck floor before I got in the car. I drove without music. When I reached Brook Hollow Academy, the campus was mostly dark except for the administration wing and one lit classroom on the second floor. The curved drive was empty. A security guard at the entrance checked my name against a list before letting me through. That was a choice too. Someone inside wanted the meeting controlled. Good. So did I? Ruiz met me in the lobby. He still had the same wrinkled jacket on, but now his tie was gone and his sleeves were rolled once. He held a manila envelope under one arm. Nothing dramatic, he said quietly as we walked down the corridor. That wasn't the plan. The board chair is on speaker from home. Outside counsel is in person. Martin Voss is in there. Department chair too. That's enough. He gave me a look as we stopped outside a conference room with frosted glass. You understand this isn't a deposition. Of course. He studied my face for a second, then opened the door. The room smelled like old coffee, copier paper, and carpet that had been cleaned recently. A tray with bottled water sat untouched in the middle of the table. Martin Voss stood near the far end with both hands resting on a chair back. Beside him sat a woman in a dark suit I assumed was the outside counsel. The department chair sat farther down, shoulders tense, hands folded too tightly. A speakerphone light glowed in the center of the table. No one offered sympathy this time. That was fine with me. Martin Voss spoke first. Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming. I took a seat. You asked. The attorney introduced herself. Smooth voice. Careful consonants. She said they wanted to reduce misunderstanding and keep everyone aligned on facts and process. I let her finish. Then I said, that would be useful. Voss sat down across from me. He looked composed, but not as composed as he had in the front office the night before. People change when paper arrives. The board chair's voice came through the speakerphone. Older man, controlled, professional, slightly winded, as if he had rushed home to make the call and resented being rushed by his own institution. Mr. Mercer, he said, the board is committed to a fair review. I'm glad to hear it. The attorney folded her hands. Before we proceed, I want to be clear that this is an informal discussion and no one here is conceding liability or intent. I looked at her. Then let's limit ourselves to records. That shifted the room almost immediately. The department chair looked down at the table. Martin Voss leaned back a fraction. Ruiz stayed near the wall, envelope still under his arm. I reached into my folder and removed 3 sheets, laying them flat in front of me. The school has described this as an accident, I said. The preliminary summary uses the phrase unintentional chemical contact. The revised teacher statement softened the earlier language after administrative contact. The school also reported a camera synchronization failure at exactly the relevant time. I turned one page slightly so the attorney could see the printed line. No one here needs my opinion, I said. What matters is whether the records hold. The attorney began to answer, but I continued in the same tone and she stopped. Now we have the chemistry prep room log. Silence. Not dramatic silence. Administrative silence. The kind that arrives when everyone knows the object in question exists and no one wants to be the first one to name what it means. Ruiz stepped forward and placed the manila envelope on the table. He did not open it. He didn't have to. I kept my eyes on Martin Voss. Your son appears in the prep room twice during the week before the attack. No supervising initials. Then there is a note the day before the attack referencing a student near the acid cabinet, reminded not to handle items unsupervised. Initials TV. The department chair closed her eyes briefly. Voss did not look at her. He looked at me. That does not prove intent, the attorney said. No, I said. It proves access. And notice. The board chair's breathing came faintly over the speaker. No one else spoke. I continued. The school also delayed parent notification longer than expected for an event of this severity. Hazmat consultation came later than it should have. A witness statement was revised. The school's first concern in writing was defamation. The second was privacy. Student safety appears after that. The attorney straightened a page in front of her, a small, useless movement. Mr. Mercer, again, we understand your emotions. No, I said, and my voice stayed calm enough that the word carried farther than a raised one would have. That is exactly the mistake this school keeps making. No one moved. This is not about my emotions, I said. This is about your records, your timing, your wording, your choices. Martin Voss finally spoke. You're drawing conclusions from fragments. I looked at him for a moment. No, I said. I'm defining the shape of what already happened. He folded his arms. My son is 13. My daughter is 12, I said. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The attorney stepped in again. Even if the prep room entries are accurate, student presence in that room does not establish misuse of any material, and certainly not in connection with an event that may still have been accidental. That depends, I said, on whether the asset inventory reconciles. That landed. The department chair looked up quickly, then back down. There it was. People tell the truth with their eyes long before they do it with words. I turned to her, not unkindly. Has the sulfuric acid inventory been checked against pre-class quantity and post-incident quantity? She swallowed. Hi. I don't handle the full inventory personally. That wasn't the question. Her hands tightened together. There are inventory procedures. I nodded once. I'm sure there are. Then I turned back to the board speaker and said, this school does not have a one-family problem anymore. It has a governance problem. The board chair spoke after a few seconds. His voice had lost some of its earlier distance. What exactly are you asking for tonight? I already had the answer. Independent retention of all original logs, immediate suspension of any internal narrative labeling this an accident, removal of Martin Voss from any oversight role in the review, written notice to all relevant staff that no documents may be altered or destroyed, and preservation interviews with every adult who touched the record. The attorney inhaled to object. I raised one hand slightly, not to silence her, just to mark the next sentence. And one more thing, I said. I want written confirmation tonight that the board understands this may involve prior unsafe access to hazardous materials by the same student before the attack on my daughter. That sentence changed the room, not because it was emotional, because it widened the liability window. The attorney looked at Voss. Voss looked at the table. The department chair looked like someone deciding whether a career was worth one more lie. The board chair spoke into the speakerphone, slower now. Martin, step out of the review immediately. Voss turned toward the phone. This is absurd. No, the chairman said. This is now a board matter. The attorney began to say they needed to confer privately. Ruiz looked at me once, and I stood. I'm not here to debate, I said. I'm here to make sure the record knows it has been seen. Then I gathered my papers carefully, one by one. No hurry, no performance. As I slid the last sheet into the folder, the department chair said, very quietly, there's more. The room went still again. I looked at her. She stared at the table as she spoke. The teacher filed a behavior concern form about Tyler 3 weeks ago. It mentioned hostility toward Emma and unsafe conduct in the lab. No one interrupted her. It never went into the student discipline system, she said. Mr. Voss told me he would handle it personally. I closed the folder. Then I waited. Nobody in the room spoke for several seconds after that. The speakerphone gave off a faint static hum. Somewhere out in the hallway, a door closed softly. The bottled water on the tray caught the overhead light in a thin, bright line. Small things. Ordinary things. They always stand out when a room finally stops pretending. I looked at the department chair. What was on the form? I asked. Her voice was careful now, but not controlled in the same way it had been earlier. This was different. Less managed. More tired. It noted repeated comments toward Emma. Competitive fixation. Disruptive behavior around chemicals and equipment. The teacher recommended restricted lab access unless directly supervised. I nodded once. And where is that form now? She glanced at Martin Voss, then away from him. I submitted it to administration. That wasn't the question. A pause. Then, I don't know where the original is. The attorney spoke quickly after that, trying to seal the opening. We need to stop here and conduct a proper document review before anyone makes assumptions about missing internal records. But the board chair had heard enough. His voice came through the speakers sharper than before. Ms. Hale, he said to the attorney, the board is directing outside preservation tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. That changed the balance. You could feel it. The attorney sat back slightly. Martin Voss stayed very still. Detective Ruiz didn't move at all. I asked the department chair one more question. Did you discuss the form with the teacher after you submitted it? Yes. What did she say? That she was worried Tyler would do something impulsive. No one looked at Martin Voss then. They didn't need to. The board chair said, Mr. Mercer, you'll receive written confirmation of the board's actions this evening. I'll look for it. Then I turned to Ruiz. Do you need anything further from me tonight? He understood why I asked it that way. Not here, he said. I nodded and left the room. No speeches. No final lines. No satisfaction to perform. Just the hallway, the low hum of the building after hours, and the sound of my own shoes on the carpet runner as I walked back toward the lobby. Ruiz caught up with me outside under the covered entrance. The pavement was still wet. The rain had stopped, but water kept dropping from the edge of the roof in slow, even taps. He held the manila envelope in one hand. You were right, he said. About what? This stopped being about one witness statement a while ago. I looked out toward the dark drive and the line of trees beyond the stone sign. Yes. He shifted the envelope under his arm. The prep room copies are enough for me to push harder. The behavior form, if we find it, changes the whole case. If you don't find the form, I said, the absence changes it too. He looked at me for a second, then nodded. Yeah, it does. There are cases where truth arrives cleanly. One camera angle, one recording, one confession. This wasn't going to be one of those. This was going to be dates, language, prior notice, altered framing, and paper that had been handled too many times by the wrong people. That was all right. Paper leaves fingerprints even when it disappears. Before I got in the car, Ruiz said, try to get some rest. I will. He knew I wouldn't. He said it anyway. Back at the hospital, Emma was awake. The room was dim, and the nurse had turned the audiobook back on at a very low volume. Rainwater smell still drifted in faintly each time someone opened the hallway door. Emma turned her face toward me as soon as I stepped in. You were gone longer, she said. Yes. Paperwork. Yes. That answer was still true. I sat down beside her and set the folder on my knee. She reached out until her fingers found my sleeve. Did something change? Yes. In a good way? I thought about that before answering. Accuracy first. In a real way, I said. She accepted that. She always had a better ear for truth than most adults. Then she asked, are they still saying it was an accident? Some are trying. But not for much longer? No, I said. Not for much longer. She let go of my sleeve and settled back against the pillow. That night, just before midnight, the board chair's email arrived. I read it standing by the window. It confirmed 5 things. First, Martin Voss had been removed from all involvement in the school's internal response and placed on immediate administrative leave. Second, an outside records management firm had been retained to secure physical and digital materials related to the incident. Third, an independent investigator would review prior complaints, lab access procedures, and administrative handling of student safety concerns. Fourth, all staff had been instructed in writing to preserve documents, notes, messages, drafts, and logs. Fifth, the board had reported the matter to its insurer and to state education oversight authorities. I printed the email and put it in the folder. Then I made a new page. What exists now: prior warning access log, delayed parent notification, revised statement, camera claim, still unsupported outside board action, administrative leave. That was the first page in the file that felt heavier than the school's language. The next morning, things moved fast. Detective Ruiz called at 8:14. We found the behavior form. That was all he had to say at first. I stood in the hospital corridor by the vending machines and listened. It was in a scanned PDF queue, not the discipline system. Time-stamped 3 weeks ago. Teacher submitted it. Marked reviewed by administration. No action entry attached. Who reviewed it? Martin Voss. That part mattered legally, morally, and structurally. Prior notice. Direct notice.